whenever I'm trying to help somebody to really get a grip on what their life is going to be like after they stop drinking, especially when they're in the first few days, is I get them to make a comparison between now and before, right? So before and after kind of thing. And I think on a personal level, it can be a very powerful thing to do, right? To see all the discomfort that you're going through now, or to take that discomfort that you're going through now and just put it into context with all the discomfort that has led you to the point of wanting to get rid of that old life, that old way of thinking, those old behaviors, the alcohol itself, and see the discomfort that brought you here, that if you don't stop alcohol, that's going to get worse and worse and worse, right? It's not going to get better. And then to look at the discomfort that you're going through now and to think that that's going to end, that this is going to decrease, the discomfort is going to decrease as the happiness takes over, and all the good stuff that comes from being free from this poison will bring you, right? So I thought a good way of looking at that was from the perspective of hangovers and no hangovers. So hangovers before and no hangovers after. And the hangover really represented to me everything that was wrong about drinking alcohol in a small little parcel, right? It represents that drinker's identity, the consequences of that, the short term and the long term. So the physical stuff that you're having in the short term and the long term. The physical, the hangover itself, feeling crap. The mental stuff where you're forgetting stuff and you're wondering what you did last night, and just that horrible drain on your own self-worth when you're thinking to yourself, what did I say to somebody? Or if you remember what you're saying, even worse, why did I say that? Why did I do that? I wouldn't normally do those kind of things. And those kind of things, if you do them over a long time, they tend to chip away at you, And then step across that line, you get no hangovers. And that represents, waking up every morning with a clear head, waking up every morning knowing that you can control the day ahead, The more you do this, the more you feel good about yourself, the more progress you're making. You go to bed at night looking forward to the next day, you get up the next day looking forward to the day ahead. When I look back at my old life, it wasn't like I never considered myself to be an alcoholic. For me, an alcoholic is somebody who is just at that worst end of this, where they're getting up in the morning and the first thing they're thinking about is alcohol, and the last thing they think about is alcohol. So your whole existence, it revolves around alcohol now. That for me is an alcoholic. And I never thought about myself like that. I had a business, I was a pretty good father, although the father thing was really the issue that brought it to a head for me. But I still felt I was a good father, and there was a lot of other things. And we've been talking about the drinker's identity up until now. And the drinker's identity is part of your core self. It becomes a part of your core self. But you've got multiple identities, right? You've got identities on the plus side of things, and you've got identities on the negative side. So on the plus side for me was being a father. That was one that I really enjoyed and was proud of. I have a hard-working identity, from my dad, wanting to work hard. I have identity of, let's say, I want to work for myself. So that's one of my other identities. On the negative side of things, I'm quite a procrastinator when I want to be, right? I can get sat down and not really want to get up and do stuff, if I get into that mood. So that is one of the things that pulls away from the worker side of me, the hard-working side of me. The drinker's identity, obviously, that was one that I used to have. And these identities, they coexist with each other, and they influence each other, but they're also on a hierarchy. So, you've got identities that are more important to you than others, and they may be, they're not always chosen. Where these identities are on that hierarchy. So you might value yourself as a father, you might value yourself as a mother, mother or father. You might value yourself as being a hard worker or being a business person or whatever it is that you value yourself for, but subconsciously you value that, the alcohol thing, and that then sneaks up the hierarchy and starts to gain control, or not control over your life, but it starts to dominate the other hierarchies. You know, I was a drinker for over 30 years, and I haven't drank now in 12 years. So I remember making a video after I stopped drinking alcohol in that first year, and I remember thinking, I've done more in that first year. I probably said it in that first video. I've done more in this first year than I've done in the last 5 years put together. Why? You know, it took me a long time to figure out how I'd done that. You know, first of all, I just put it down to having a clear mind and, you know, all the other things that come with, you know, I can get more stuff done in the morning. I think it starts out when you're a kid, you know, when you start out drinking first. If I take myself back to when I first started drinking, I mean, not when I had my first alcohol, but when I really first started to, you know, 17, 18 years of age, when I first started to drink properly. And when you're young, I'm not talking about the big alcohol, the marketing, all that kind of stuff. You know, set that aside for 1 minute. Your own youth tricks you, right? Your own youth, you've got time on your side. When you're 17, 18 years of age, you're just starting out. You think you're immortal. You think all these things are happening to other people. They're not going to happen to you, right? And, you know, when you have a hangover, it doesn't really matter if you miss the odd day, if you're not compos mentis, you know, in the next day, and you know, you're not really getting on with things. You can afford to lose a bit of time. But think about when you first drink. I mean, I remember, you know, like I'd be drunk the night before, and then I'd get up in the morning and I'd comb my hair and wash my face, and I'd be grand to go, you know. And any shit that comes around with being drunk can easily be put down to just being a young fella, you know, youthful shenanigans, and that's it. You know, you've got your society is kind of pushing this on you. All your mates are pushing this on you. Maybe your family is normalizing it. So alcohol itself is normalized in your society, and you don't know any different, right? Even when somebody will tell you, you know, oh, watch yourself here or watch yourself there, be careful with this or that. You know, I remember seeing drunken people, or you see people who other people refer to as an alcoholic, but you think that, you know, that's otherworldly. It's not, as I said, it's not going to happen to you. You know, one of the things I always say to people who are having fear or just negativity about moving forwards into not drinking, when people have got fear of missing out, or just when they fear what's going to happen, who they're going to become, all that kind of stuff, I say to them, look, if I could bring you out to a year of having no alcohol and show you what you can achieve in that first year, even 6 months or 3 months, right? You would have no fear, because you would see what you're capable of doing once you get out of that day-to-day routine of drinking alcohol. You know, I think a useful question to ask yourself is, you know, if you could take yourself back to that youthful self who just started out drinking alcohol, and you could put them into, you know, the reverse kind of situation, put them into the body and the mind of the person who is just, who wants to stop drinking alcohol now. I was having, you know, 2-3 day hangovers. If I could go back and bring my younger self and put my younger self into that body and feel those hangovers and feel myself now, would I continue to drink? You know, to put myself into that emotional state, into that clouded mind, the kind of the state of my body, the state of my emotional self when I stopped drinking alcohol, that would surely scare my younger self to going, yeah, I'm not doing that, you know. Now the problem is that, you know, going back to that person, that young person who thinks that they're immortal, who thinks that nothing like this is going to happen to them, that's the person, that's from the stage that starts to build this drinker's identity. You know, the person who can get up in the hangover and just brush it off and there's no problems with it. The person who, when I started drinking first, a couple of pints and that was it, I was on my back. Near enough, you know, my head was spinning around so I couldn't drink anymore. But that's the person who this stuff works on. You know, it's the same thing with the marketing. If we go to the big alcohol and look at the advertising, that's the person who this stuff works on, because they're inexperienced, because they don't know any better. And I think one of the biggest problems of this is that drinker's identity over time, when you when you drink more and more and more, don't forget you've only got so much time and energy, right? You've only got so much time and energy. You can't focus your mind on two things at once. You can only focus on one thing at once, right? Over time, your life starts to slowly suffer. And it's not, the drinker's identity doesn't even come about overnight. It's a gradual thing that's built up over many years. And the biggest problem that I see with it is that it brings a slow acceptance of less for yourself, right? Of a discounted version of yourself, of a cut-priced version of yourself, right? Somebody who's willing to kind of accept less and less. It dulls your ability or your desire to really start looking in and reflecting on yourself, because you've got that easy escape route where you can just go, fuck this, I'll just drink, I don't want to think about this today. And the worse you get, the more you drink, the worse that habit becomes for you, the easier it is to escape from that, because the more your problems are becoming, right? And I'm not saying this about, like I said, when I stopped, I still had a good business, I still thought about myself as a good dad, and there was a lot of good stuff that I was doing in my life, but I was always looking at myself and thinking, where would I have been now if I hadn't stopped drinking alcohol? And I'm not saying that is something that we can, that you should dwell on yourself in a negative way, but it's helpful sometimes to look at it and say, well, where could I have been if I hadn't drank alcohol, and look at it from now and look forwards. Like I said, comparison before and after is a good thing. Look forwards and say to yourself, in a year's time, where can I be if I stop drinking alcohol? Or where am I going to be if I continue down this route? One of the things that's really helpful for you to do is to look at tolerance. And I'm not just talking about alcohol tolerance. We all know that if you start out drinking 2 pints and after a few years you're going to be drinking 10 pints to get the same buzz, right? You just need more alcohol as your body gets used to it. But tolerance comes in many different forms. There's certain lines that you cross in your life when you're drinking, when you're taking on these identities, these negative identities. There's certain lines that you cross where you will tolerate more in terms of your values, your beliefs, your principles. You'll start to go, yeah, it's okay for me to bend this principle now, or yeah, I didn't really think about that in terms of a value. You start to cut corners with your own life. And you'll start to expect less of yourself. And this all, like I said earlier on, it starts to, you start to develop a viewpoint of yourself from a bargain basement point of view. That you're reducing your own self-worth and your own, what you're capable of doing, your outlook on your own abilities and what you can do, what you dream of, what you desire to do. And I know this because that was me 12 years ago. And when I stopped drinking alcohol, that changed, not overnight, but it did change over time. And it really does affect, that's what I'm saying about the core identities, that, we've got a mixture of positive identities and negative identities. And those negative identities, when you're feeding those, they really start to then undermine the positive identities and undermine your core. And I think that's how people just they sink lower and lower and lower, because it just becomes part and parcel of who they are. Like I said, they tolerate less in their lives, or they tolerate much more in their lives in terms of crappy things, and they expect less of themselves in terms of pushing themselves and pushing their own expectations. And what I was saying earlier on about, the hangover, waking up the next day and feeling like a fool because of what you've said or done. But also it's that you wake up the next day thinking to yourself, why did I do this to myself, Or why did I say that? Who is that person that said that? Because that's not me. Like I said, it's one thing doing this once or twice or 3 times, but when you repeat this over and over and over again for many years, it chips away at your confidence, it chips away at your at who you are as a person, that integrity that you have. And I think when you repeat a behavior over and over again, it's a commitment to strengthening that behavior. When you repeat a behavior over and over again, it's a commitment to strengthening that identity. So that's how the drinker's identity gets stronger and stronger and stronger. I always say to people, stopping drinking alcohol is the first thing that you do. It's what you do after that counts. Stop the flow, do the work, move on. So it's doing that work and working on yourself that matters. But it's the same with drinking. You put the alcohol into your body, that's bad enough. But all the things that I didn't get done the next day or the next day or the next day because of that one drinking session, and more than likely because I had that one drinking session, I'm going to have another drinking session or another drinking session, and it's just this vicious cycle that takes you down. Where I'm saying to go with this is, it's a tough decision to make, right? Everyone comes at this from a different point of view. It's going to be a tough few weeks, right? Let's face it, coping and just acclimatizing, and we don't like to admit these things, but it's tough in different ways, right? Everyone's going to have a different way of looking at this, but the benefits of getting up every day, waking up without a hangover, your mind is going to be, I think, one of the first things that will clear. You'll feel better in your body, and you're stringing together one day after another day after another, and then you start to put together the weeks, and then the months, and then the years, right? And think about that, stringing those days together with a clear mind, and as I say, getting up in the morning without a hangover, being able to face into the day, and you've got a plan for the day, and because you haven't got a hangover, because you feel good about yourself, you're going to be able to more than likely put those plans into practice, right? And then consistently add to what you did the day before, right? You haven't got any of these huge self-imposed barriers that you're putting up in front of yourself. Like I said, our mantra here is stop the flow, do the work, move on. You can't do the work until you stop the flow. That's why it took me so many years to stop drinking alcohol, or to move away from that mindset, that identity, was because I kept it alive with moderation. It takes time for that drinker's identity to shift away, for the drinker's identity influence to shift away, right? So it is what it is. This, whatever it is that's going to happen to you, a lot of the stuff that will, a lot of the way that you approach this, your attitude and your commitment to it, how responsible you feel for it, that's going to dictate how easier it is after you've stopped the flow, after you've stopped the poison. And then, it is just moving forwards and doing the work on getting rid of that drinker's identity. So, like I said, if I could take you out to 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or a year into this journey, you would have no fear about it, because you realize how much alcohol was holding you back and how much progress you've made since you've stopped drinking alcohol. If I could show you that and bring you back today, wouldn't you be excited about the life that you could live without alcohol holding you back? Anyway, I'll leave it there for today. We've got our program Habits Unplugged. If you want to get the first couple of weeks of that free, there's a link in the description. There's no obligation to continue, no credit card, it's absolutely free. Take care of yourself. I'll speak to you soon. Onwards and upwards. Bye now.